Amaya arrived 5 minutes early because that was what her mother had trained into her. Early means respectful, early means ready, early means you can breathe before the day asks you to run. The porch was 2 shades lighter than the front door, a gray-blue that suggested taste without the confidence to go full navy, and there was a wreath with silk lemons arranged in a cheery oval like a promise that the household believed in hospitality. She smoothed her shirt, clean, pressed, the good one she wore for first meetings, and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. On her phone, the text thread blinked back at her. 2 hours trial. The last message from the employer read, a bubble of certainty after a chain of questions about experience, references, and whether she was comfortable with a little deep cleaning. 2 hours. That seemed fair. She would show what she could do and decide if the house felt safe, if the energy inside it matched the friendliness of the wreath. The door opened before she could knock twice. Hi. You must be Amaya. The woman in the doorway had bright eyes and a hurried smile as if she was already walking while standing still. I'm Claire. Come in, come in. The house breathed cool air, lemon cleaner, laundry detergent, something floral. From the foyer, every room opened out like pages in a glossy magazine. A living room with cream-colored sofas that had never met grape juice, a dining room with a table long enough for a small wedding, a kitchen whose marble counters reflected the light like a second sun. It was beautiful and too much, lived in and staged, the kind of place where tidiness hid in baskets and bins labeled in cursive. 2 hours to see how we fit, Claire said, already leading the way toward the kitchen, as if the text message had become script. Nothing intense. A light clean. We've had trouble finding the right, flow. Of course, Amaya said. She could feel that familiar calculative buzz, the one that tallied surfaces and corners without permission. 2 hours meant a sweep through the kitchen and powder room, maybe a dust and vacuum of the main floor if the spaces were picked up. But the counters carried the aftermath of a week's life. Cereal bowls in a leaning tower, sticky rings where juice glasses had sweated and gone, a cutting board crusted with onion, a blender that had dried into its own fossil record. The sink was full, the dishwasher full too. She saw the blinking blue light that meant clean, and the stove wore a constellation of splatters. Would you like me to start in here? She asked, deferring to the script while mapping the choreography in her head. Yes, the kitchen is our Achilles' heel. Claire laughed in a way that asked Amaya to share the joke, as if this were a friendly secret more than neglect. Oh, and if you can do the downstairs bathroom, the one off the mudroom, that would be amazing. The boys? She rolled her eyes, a mother-to-mother gesture though she didn't know whether Amaya had children. I'll be upstairs on a Zoom for part of the time, but just holler. Amaya washed her hands, slid on nitrile gloves, and began the ritual that had steadied her through 100 kitchens. Clear first, then clean. She lifted plates and cutlery and glasses into the dishwasher in stacks that would make the machine a cathedral of sanitation. She ran hot water, cracked the dishwasher, and let the steam loosen the residue on the blender blade. She wiped the counters in broad strokes that brought back the marble's memory of shine. She worked not frantically but with swift intention, a quiet intensity that made people think the room had healed itself. Time has 2 speeds when your hands are busy. It whips past like a train when you don't look, and it lurches and creaks when you check the clock. She didn't check the clock for what felt like a long time. When she did, it said 10:41. She'd arrived at 9. 2 hours, she repeated in her head the way a runner repeats a mantra. The kitchen was halfway to itself again. The oven caught her eye, its glass door had forgotten what transparency meant, and she mentally flagged it as a next visit with consent and fee kind of task. Boundaries save backs. She rinsed the sink, polished the faucet so it reflected her face like a quick sketch, then moved toward the mudroom bathroom. The bathroom announced its challenges before she turned on the light. A smell of ammonia threaded with a deeper note, the way teenage boys will write their names in the air and not know it. She breathed slowly and cracked the window. She did not blame. She never blamed. Blame made people perform defensiveness when what she needed was cooperation, respect, and timely pay. Still, she noted the time, 11:03 now, and gauged the work. The fixtures needed a full wipe, the floor wanted a scrub, the mirror was polka-dotted with toothpaste. She filled a caddy with her preferred solutions. Nothing too harsh, Lungs are not invincible, and started at the top because gravity is real. By the time the faucet shone like confessed sin, she had the beginning of a headache, not yet pain but coming. Claire passed by the bathroom at 11:40 with the glide of someone who had not had to argue with her own body today. "This looks amazing already," she said, which was true and not yet relevant. Praise had a way of nudging the goalpost down the field. "If you have time," she added lightly, "the family room could use a vacuum. The dog just shits." She gestured toward a room where a honey-colored retriever dozed under a window like butter melting into a rug. "I can take a quick pass," Amaya said, and pulled off her gloves to wash her hands again. Quick meant 10 minutes at most, a sweep that did not pretend to be exorcism. The vacuum whose cord she uncoiled had the same soft growl as every vacuum. The dog watched her with soulful skepticism and then with gratitude as she made a nest of the hairs that had abandoned ship. She was good at this part, the visible transformation, and she allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction at the neat lines the vacuum left. Proof of effort, a harvest of order. It was nearly noon, and her stomach pressed a polite question. In houses where hospitality lived at the table, someone would offer water or ask about lunch, suggest a quick break. In houses where work was a background service like air conditioning, time slid forward without such interruptions. She checked her phone while standing near the kitchen peninsula, keeping her body language where it could be seen. 2 hours would end around 11. It was 12. She swallowed and rehearsed a line that was professional and kind. "I'll pause for a 10-minute lunch break now, and then we can review what's next," she planned to say. The script would create a boundary without accusation, a fence you could open and close without slamming. Claire's footsteps came down the stairs like punctuation. "You're a lifesaver," she said, taking her mug to the sink that was no longer a sink but a smooth suggestion of a lake in winter. "Would you mind, since you're already on a roll, just giving the upstairs bath a once-over? My mother-in-law is coming later, and you know mothers-in-law." The laugh again, asking for complicity. Amaya met her eyes and smiled, a soft expression that held its own ground. "I can do that as an add-on on a future visit," she said. "For today's 2-hour trial, I've completed the kitchen reset, the mudroom bath deep wipe, and a quick vacuum in the family room. If you'd like, I can propose a plan for the upstairs bath next time." A tiny flinch passed over Claire's face, so quick you could miss it. "Oh, I thought the trial was more open. To see your range. You're so efficient, I feel like we'll barely scratch the surface." In the pause, Amaya could feel how a conversation can take on a second, invisible shape if you do not give the first one a spine. "I hear you," she said gently. "Part of seeing fit is making sure expectations and time match. I budgeted 2 hours this morning to get a clear picture of the house. You have a beautiful space. There's plenty we can schedule out." "Of course," Claire said, her voice brightened by 2 degrees, the way a person turns up a lamp to deny dusk. "Of course. Do whatever you think is best. I trust you." And then, without meaning to demand it, she placed a fresh stack of folded towels on the counter like a nudge toward upstairs anyway, a suggestion disguised as fabric. Amaya excused herself to the porch for 5 minutes and texted her own note into the record she kept for herself. Arrived 8:55. Kitchen reset, mudroom bath, vacuum family room. Client asked for upstairs bath, clarified scope. She drank water from her bottle and let the air cool her scalp. 2 hours meant done soon. But the kitchen counters had, in the interim, attracted a new small comet of crumbs. The family room sported a pair of socks that had fallen from somewhere. Houses were living things. You could never finish them, only care for them and step away with intention. She slipped her phone back into her pocket and returned to the work, mindful of every minute she gave. The last 15 minutes ticked in quiet industry. She did a final wipe of the stovetop, shining circles that turned the dull into bright. She broke down a cardboard box by the recycling. She straightened the rug under the coffee table, which had migrated north like birds. When she stopped, really stopped, the silence felt like a person in the room. She took off her gloves and washed her hands. She dried them with a paper towel from a roll that had had 3 lives today, and in the small rectangle of reflective steel above the stove she saw her face. Calm, a little tired, but set. She had worked. That word had weight. It deserved to be acknowledged. Claire reappeared with the dog, who had a tennis ball in his mouth and a look that said he understood everything. "You're wonderful," she said. "Truly. This is night and day. I can see you fitting in perfectly here." "Thank you," Amaya said. She heard the shift underneath the praise, the logic that if you fit, you keep giving until you don't know what fitting costs. "For today's trial," she continued, and the words were smooth because she had said them before in bathrooms and kitchens and foyers, "how would you like to handle payment?" For a heartbeat, the room held both versions of reality, the one where trial meant a sample task and a handshake, and the one where it had quietly become a morning of labor that had transformed 4 rooms and would make a mother-in-law feel her daughter had everything under control. Claire's eyebrows lifted the way people's faces lift when their mind is running 2 options and trying to pick the one that sounds nicer. "Oh," she said finally, light as foam. "Trials aren't paid. It's just to see how we fit. That's standard, right?" Amaya felt the old temptation rise, the easier path where you swallow your own value because conflict is sharp. But the words she had practiced were waiting for her like a step that wouldn't give way. "Actually," she said, keeping her tone warm, factual, steady, "a trial is a mini-task under an hour to see style and approach. Today was 2 hours and change of kitchen reset, bathroom sanitation and vacuuming. That's standard work." Claire blinked, and the dog dropped the ball so it thumped once against the cabinet. Somewhere in the house, a washing machine began a spin cycle with a watery roar. No one else ever. I didn't realize." "It's okay," Amaya said, and meant the words as an invitation to repair, not an absolution for what had just happened. "I can send an invoice itemized for today's work, and we can agree on a proper trial for next time if you'd like. I also include a copy of my policies so we're aligned." The moment stretched. In it, Amaya remembered the first kitchen where she'd stayed silent, where she'd gone home with aching hands and a bland apology in her texts about why she couldn't contribute to a friend's baby shower gift that month. She remembered her mother's voice, the one that taught her how to fold a fitted sheet like a magic trick and to insist that a person's time is not a donation unless they choose it to be. She remembered the grocery list on her fridge, where the price of eggs had drawn a little arrow in her mind from threshold to threshold. "I'll have to," Claire started and then paused, her mouth settling into a line. She looked around at the rooms that had been gently restored by someone else's deliberate care. "Send me the invoice," she said, the words careful like she was fitting a new habit into place. "And the policies. I want to do this right." "Thank you," Amaya said. The dog nosed her hand and she scratched behind his ear, a simple friendship that asked for nothing but existed anyway. She lifted her bag, took one last glance at the kitchen, shining for now, and stepped back into the noon light. The porch lemons greeted her again as if to say that hospitality can be more than decoration. It can be a decision. She walked down the path toward the sidewalk with her shoulders unbowed, the weight in her bag no heavier than when she arrived, but something in her chest lighter, steadier. The text thread winked to life in her hand as she typed, "Invoice for today attached. Thank you for the opportunity. Policies included for your review." Then she hit send and let the day move forward. On the bus ride home, Amaya drafted the invoice and policies with the steadiness of someone tightening screws on a wobbly chair. Itemized lines, kitchen reset, bathroom sanitation, quick vacuum, sat beneath the total like solid bricks. She attached her 1-page policy sheet, the same document she had revised after too many trials, that turned into shifts. Clear definitions, time blocks, break rights, consent for cameras, late fee language that was firm without being punitive. When she hit send, the bus sighed at a red light and she allowed herself a small exhale. The message came back quickly. "Got it? Thank you. Would love to have you back Friday if you're available. 9 to 12. The swiftness made her blink. People rarely agreed to the terms so fast. Resistance was more common than respect. She typed back, "Friday 9 to 12 works. Please confirm the deposit to hold the slot." And tucked the phone away, already sketching a plan for how to keep Friday within the lines she had drawn. Friday began with one of those crystalline mornings that feel like the world washed its face. She arrived 3 minutes early this time, early enough to smell coffee through the door. The lemon wreath had not moved, a little false sun still promising welcome. The deposit had arrived the night before with a brief, "done," from Claire. That tidy ping of money had turned down the volume on Amaya's worry a notch. She rehearsed her checklist on the porch. 3 hours, defined scope, water at the start, a planned break at the 90-minute mark, confirm add-ons in writing, leave with dignity intact. Claire opened the door in a cardigan that looked expensive in a way you could only tell by how the thread lay against itself. "Amaya, hi," she said, stepping aside like a stagehand in a ballet. "Thank you so much for coming back. The house still looks amazing from the other day." She glanced toward the family room as if the memory might have left marks on the rug. "Good morning," Amaya said. "Happy to be here. Before I start, today's plan is the upstairs bath you mentioned, plus a maintenance sweep in the kitchen, yes?" She set her bag down, not fully, a small hinge held in her mind until the answer was clear. "Yes, perfect," Claire said quickly, then added, with an airy casualness that waved toward the ceiling, "and if there's time, the boys' rooms could use a tidy, just surfaces, nothing deep." The phrase, "if there's time," floated between them like a balloon, innocent until it became a dirigible shadow. "Let's look together and prioritize," Amaya said, keeping her tone even. She had learned long ago that the word prioritize could either be a fence or a trampoline. The trick was to anchor the posts. Claire led the way upstairs, and the first bathroom presented itself with glossy tile and the stubborn traces of toothpaste wars. Amaya mapped the work: mirror, sink, fixtures, tub, toilet, floors. 10 minutes to let the product rest on the shower walls while she did the sink. Microfiber cloths. 1 for glass, 1 for chrome, 1 for surfaces, because cross-contamination is a silent thief of shine. "The boys' rooms are just down there," Claire said, pointing to 2 doors that appeared at the end of the hallway like twin disclaimers. She opened one. The room wasn't a disaster, not in the way of toppled dressers and mysterious stains. It was the clutter of young life. Lego cities paused mid-battle, socks that had given up on pairs, notebooks with drawings half begun, a trophy from a fall soccer season that felt recent and already like a story retold. The second room wore the same adolescence. A drum practice pad on the desk, hoodies folded and then unfolded, a bedding set that had drifted sideways. "Surface tidy," Claire repeated, the way someone might say just a trim to a stylist, and Amaya nodded, filing it under maybe, the kind that requires a clean trade of minutes. She returned to the bathroom, set her supplies in a neat fan-like instruments on a tray and asked, "Before I get started, may I have a glass of water?" Asking early had become a habit, not a plea, a protocol. Hydration, body, dignity. "Of course," Claire said, and then looked at her watch. "Let me grab it for you, and then I need to hop on a quick call." She disappeared down the stairs and came back with a tall glass that chimed lightly against the tile when she set it on the counter. "Help yourself to more if you need," she added. It landed easy. Amaya filed the feeling, the small care in the gesture, a weight in her chest shifting from brace to average. She worked. The mirror turned from freckled to frank, reflecting back a woman whose face was calm, whose eyebrow had a tiny scar from a childhood kitchen mishap, whose hair she had learned to love without apologizing for its stubbornness. The fixtures surrendered fingerprints in a succession of circles. She talked to the shower walls the way people talk to plants, quiet, encouraging, and gave the grout the attention it asked for. The first half hour passed like a good song, the kind you don't have to think about to hum accurately. At the 40-minute mark, Claire's voice drifted from down the hall, then the stairs, floating wallpaper of a business call. "Yes, we're aiming EOD. No, pull the creatives. Loop me in on the doc." Amaya shifted her work to the floor, letting the cleaner rest on the tricky corner behind the toilet, pulling the bath mat into a little accordion to reach underneath. She rubbed away at a ring that had a ghost of itself but let go when asked firmly. She rinsed. She dried. It all transformed from in progress to done in a handful of minutes that felt like closure. The second upstairs bathroom was smaller and kinder. She was halfway through its mirror when Claire popped her head in with a smile on a string. "Quick thing," she said. "My husband's parents are stopping by around noon. Could you possibly give the guest room a quick dust? Just surfaces, truly. And this is silly, but the hallway runner's been doing this curling thing. It drives my mother-in-law crazy. If you could fix it? You're so good with the details. The words were cotton candy, sweet, insubstantial, spun to stick. Amaya kept her cloth moving, finishing the last arc on the mirror, setting it down before answering. I can dust the guest room surfaces with the remaining time after the bathroom, she said. For the runner, I recommend a proper rug pad. Fixing the curl without one is temporary and can be unsafe. She framed the sentence like a picture hung level. Oh, okay, Claire said, lingering at the threshold. Maybe just, put something heavy on the corners for now? A book? She pantomimed placing an imaginary hardback on an invisible rug, as if weight were the simple answer to everything. I won't be able to do that for safety reasons, Amaya said politely. Someone could trip. She didn't say someone like your mother-in-law. She left the pronoun open in case it might someday apply to anyone. Claire's face did the quick flinch again and then reorganized itself into brightness. No problem. I'll look for a rug pad. She floated away. Amaya resumed her rhythm. The second bathroom surrendered easily. She checked the clock. 55 minutes in total upstairs so far, leaving 2 hours and 5 minutes to go. She logged the time in her notes with the kind of precision that kept chaos outside the door. In the guest room, dust settled on the nightstand like talc. She lifted frames, swept, set them down at right angles. The lamp shades wore a fine fuzz that came off in lines on her lint roller. There was a book on the bedside table, the kind of hardcover whose jacket insists that family secrets are currency, and she moved it to wipe and put it back exactly where the shadow on the table said it had been. She paused for a second and drank half her water, noted the 90-minute mark approaching, and planned her break. When she returned to the hallway, Claire was standing with a laundry basket like a prop she'd just discovered. Would you mind, Claire began, voice feather-light, folding these if you have a second? It's just towels. They're for the boys' bathroom and it would make everything feel so finished. She offered the basket with an earnestness that was part gratitude, part strategy. Amaya smiled, and the smile carried her boundary. Folding laundry is an add-on service, she said. If you'd like to swap it for something on today's list, we can do that. Otherwise I can note it for a future session. Swap. The word opened a window. Nothing denied, everything ordered. Swap, yes. Claire said quickly. Swap. Swap the kitchen sweep for the towels? She looked into the basket as if it might coach her. Amaya considered. The boys' bathroom would need the towels to feel finished. The kitchen, however, would likely have grown its own small mess since Wednesday. But this was Claire's home and Claire's priorities. Okay, she said. I'll fold the towels instead of the kitchen sweep. Relief bloomed across Claire's face. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. She set the basket down as carefully as someone placing a baby in a bassinet and retreated again to the downstairs air, where the invisible network of her day hummed. Amaya closed the guest room door behind her and sat at the edge of the bed for her planned 5-minute break. She took another sip of water, closed her eyes for 2 breaths, and then texted a quick note to her log. 90-minute break taken. Swap agreed, towels instead of kitchen sweep. Guests at noon, mother-in-law sensitivity about runner, recommend rug pad. Small notations, keystones against future wobble. She folded towels with the kind of crispness her mother used to tease her about. I could slice bread on those edges, and stack them into harmonious towers. As she worked, she thought about the invisible math of domestic labor, how people underestimate time when the task slides into invisibility after it's done. 10 minutes to tidy a shelf, 5 to wipe a mirror, 7 to fold a basket that turns into 2 more because the basket had babies somewhere. The goalposts move not with ill will sometimes but with ignorance, like a person walking on a moving walkway without realizing the floor is conspiratorially helpful. At 1 hour and 40 minutes, she carried the finished stacks to the boys' bathroom. She placed the towels on the rack like a small proclamation that care had occurred. She wiped a final fingerprint from the chrome and walked downstairs to review the plan for the remaining time. The kitchen was as she guessed, new coffee cups, a syrup ring scouting the counter like a small sun, a jam knife abandoned near the cutting board. She checked herself. The swap had been made. The kitchen sweep was off today's list. This was one of the muscles she had worked hard to build. The ability to let a mess be someone else's for a day, to resist the pull of just one more thing. Claire met her at the bottom of the stairs with gratitude in her eyes and a phone in her hand. "You're magic," she said, a phrase that always made Amaya want to hand people a mirror and ask what they saw when they said that. My call ran long. "I'm so sorry to ask, but do you have time to quickly take out the trash? The outside bin is just by the side gate. My husband forgot this morning and the house always feels off when the trash sits." "Taking out trash is part of the kitchen sweep service," Amaya said, steady. She didn't rush the words. Rushing made people think the line was negotiable. "Since we swapped that for towel folding, I can note trash for next time if you'd like it included." Claire stood very still for a moment, as if quiet could rewind what had just been clarified. Then she nodded. "Right. Yes. Next time. I'll get it. Thank you." She picked up the bag with a little grimace that could have been about the weight or the boundary, and disappeared through the mudroom door to the side yard. Amaya glanced at the hallway runner. Its corner lifted as if it were listening. She left it alone and wrote "recommend rug pad" again in the invoice notes for emphasis. Back in the guest room, she did a final look for dust and found one small streak of sunlight holding motes like glitter. She banished them with a flit of her cloth. She checked her watch, 35 minutes left. Enough time to do a measured pass on the upstairs hallway baseboards and a quick spot check in the boys' bathroom where toothpaste had already staged a comeback. She did both, and the house answered by smelling like a story nearing its denouement. At 11:53, she washed her hands in the upstairs sink, dried them on one of the towels she had just folded, and returned it to its place with an exactness that made a gentle joke to herself. She gathered her supplies, lowered the lids of her bottles, tucked cloths into their pouches. She took a final sip of water, finished the glass, and carried it downstairs to the kitchen she had intentionally left untouched. It was okay to leave work off the list when the list said so. That was the whole point of a list. Claire reappeared with cheeks that looked wind-kissed from the quick outside errand. "Thank you truly," she said. "I can't tell you how much lighter the house feels." She stopped, eyes snagging on the counter's small syrup sun. Even the word "son" seemed to bother her now. "Oh, I forgot we swapped the kitchen. My brain." She laughed at herself, and the laugh sounded more human than strategic. "No worries," Amaya said. She put the glass in the sink, resisting the desire to wash it. Boundaries are learned like scales on a piano. "I'll walk you out," Claire said, and as they moved toward the door, the dog padded over with the tennis ball like an ongoing thesis. On the porch, the light had shifted into noon's bright certainty. "Will you send the invoice again with today's notes?" Claire asked. "And could you include the rug pad recommendation and a link to whatever you think is best?" "I trust you." "I'll include a note," Amaya said. She didn't provide shopping links anymore. Recommendations turned into returns turned into unpaid tech support. "Rug pad, yes. For the next session, if you want kitchen plus trash and boys' rooms tidy, that's a 3-hour block. We can swap other items in or extend to 4 hours for deep work." Claire nodded, taking in the architecture of time like a new language she intended to speak. "Let's do 3 hours next Wednesday, kitchen, trash, boys' rooms tidy. And we'll add the upstairs hallway baseboards if time allows." She caught herself. "If time allows," she repeated, as if the phrase had found its correct home. "Wednesday at 9 works," Amaya said. "I'll send a confirmation and the deposit request." She shouldered her bag, felt its familiar weight, and looked at the lemon wreath. Perhaps on some day after enough invoices and deposits and, if time allows, said correctly, she'd stop noticing the way it declared hospitality and start believing it. For now, she believed in her list. As she walked down the path, she considered lunch. The 90-minute break had kept her even, but the day asked a new question: how to handle the moment when a client's quick thing tried to expand like dough on a warm counter. She smiled a little, a private acknowledgement that knowing your worth is one thing, enforcing it is practice. Her phone pinged. A message from Claire: "Thank you again. Payment will be prompt." That word, prompt, felt like a fence post driven in. She turned the corner, sunlight on her face, and felt hunger arrive fully, a clear bell. "Lunch then." And after, the next house, the next negotiation with the moving goalpost. The game, she was learning, wasn't to stop the goal from moving altogether. It was to notice it, name it, and keep your feet where your contract said you stood. By Wednesday morning the weather had warmed into a forgiving kind of heat, the kind that makes even the sidewalks smell like bread. Amaya packed her bag with the same sequence she always used: gloves, cloths, solutions, spare mask, bottle of water, a small container with almonds and dried apricots, and checked her phone for the deposit ping. It was there, neat as a button. Claire had also sent a message at 7:12 a.m. "Good morning. Boys out the door by 8:10, I'll be here till 10:30, then errands." Same plan, kitchen plus trash plus boys' rooms tidy. If time allows, hallway baseboards. Thank you. The made Amaya smile despite herself. The phrase had traveled from lecture to inside joke in 1 week. She replied with a thumbs up and arriving at 8:58. Early but not so early the day would eat the margin. The lemon wreath greeted her like an acquaintance trying to become a friend. Inside, the house had the humming disorder of a weekday morning. A cereal box left open like a book, a sock in exile on the stairs, the dog angling for one more mouthful of someone's toast. Claire wore leggings and that same cardigan, hair up, a pen tucked behind one ear. "You're a miracle," she said by way of hello. "I keep thinking about the towel stacks from Friday. I literally took a photo." She laughed, half guilty, half pleased with herself. "Okay, so, kitchen is mission critical, trash needs out, the boys' rooms are at DEFCON, medium?" She lifted her hands in a gesture that meant forgive us. Time keeps winning. "Good morning," Amaya said. "Let's start with the kitchen and trash, then rooms, then baseboards if time allows." She set her bag down, confirmed the timer on her phone, 3 hours, and took a slow sip of water, preemptively guarding the part of the day that always threatened to vanish: the pause. The kitchen answered her like a patient who knows their diagnosis and is ready to cooperate. She moved through the steps with the confidence of muscle memory. Clear counters, load dishwasher, soak what needed soaking, wipe, rinse, polish. The syrup sun had spread into a continent. She erased it with a damp cloth and a short, firm circle. A crumbled granola bar lurked near the toaster like a small landslide. She scooped it into the trash bag and tied the bag off. The dog watched from the doorway with the seriousness of a foreman. At 9:35 she checked the time and her breath. 90 minutes would put her break at 10:30. Plenty of runway. Claire breezed in to fill a glass of water, checked her calendar aloud and said, "I have to run at 10:30 on the dot. Plumber window from 11 to 2, and I'm terrified they'll come right away and judge the sink if it's not pristine." She shot the sink a glance like a teenager waiting for grades. "You're already on it, of course." "Sink is already on the list," Amaya said. "I'll have it set before you go." She pulled a fresh bag into the trash can, noted the full one by the mudroom door, and glanced toward the side yard where the bins lived. "I'll take the trash out after the dishes are running." "Bless you," Claire said, and then, "One more thing, my husband thought the boys' desks looked chaotic last night. Could you do a quick straighten? Just stack the papers, maybe align the notebooks? It helps them focus." The sentence had the rhythm of a speech practiced in another room. "I can do a 5-minute straighten on each desk," Amaya said. "Bigger paper sorts are an add-on." She didn't say the part she was thinking, that desks have personalities and resent rearrangement. She had learned to leave things where their owners could still recognize themselves. "Perfect," Claire said, already scrolling, already in 3 places at once. "You're the best." She left a glass by the sink without meaning to, a breadcrumb for later. By 10:10 the dishwasher hummed with purpose. The counters reflected back the pendant lights in neat ellipses, and the sink did not fear the plumber. Amaya tied off the recycling and took both bags to the side yard, the air already sharpening with sun. She placed the bags carefully in the correct bins, closed the lids quietly, and lingered only long enough to breathe. Inside again, she drank from her bottle and felt the almonds calling from their small container. 10 minutes more, she told herself. Finish the stove, then pause. Breaks were most respected when they were written into the mental choreography. You stepped where the tape on the floor told you to stop. The stove surrendered its oil freckles. She changed cloths, transferred her attention to the boys' rooms. In the first, she aligned a stack of notebooks so their edges made a clean square, rescued a pencil from under a chair, and straightened a chair that had drifted at an angle. In the second, she corralled a galaxy of eraser bits in one satisfying sweep and returned a set of headphones to a hook. She left the everyday messiness intact. Lego half city hoodie over chair, because life lived here and deserved not to be staged beyond recognition. At 10:30, as if a parenthesis in the air had been closed, Amaya lowered herself onto the edge of the upstairs hallway bench and opened her small container. The first almond had that reassuring snap that tells the body it is remembered. She let her shoulders drop and allowed herself to be just a person about to eat, not hands in motion, not a list in a body. The apricot's sugar encouraged her like a kind sentence. She checked her phone out of habit and saw an email notification from a different client, glanced at the subject line, decided it could wait, and turned her phone face down on her knee. Quick question. Claire's voice cut around the corner, cheerful and breathless. She appeared with a small laundry basket clutched like a favor. I'm so sorry, I know you're on a break. Could you possibly throw these in the washer? My mother-in-law is technically not fussy, which means she is very fussy and she's staying over tonight, and I realize the guest sheets, well. The sentence trailed into apology and hopefulness. Amaya closed the container without snapping the lid, kept her face gentle, and looked at the time. 10:31. I'm on my scheduled break just now, she said, the words light but anchored. I'll start the washer at 10:40 and note laundry as an add-on if we swap something out. Oh, totally, Claire said, color rising in her face as if she jogged onto the wrong field. Take your time. No rush. She glanced toward the stairs. I'll set the basket by the machine. Sorry to interrupt. She retreated, the word sorry trailing like a streamer. The interruption had already interrupted, but the apology softened how much it cost. Amaya ate 2 more almonds, drank water, and breathed. The interruption's echo tugged at her attention the way a phone vibrates after it's stopped. She held the line anyway. At 10:40 she stood, stretched her hands, and headed for the laundry alcove off the upstairs hall. The washer accepted the sheets without complaint, and she started the cycle with the practiced taps of someone who has memorized every machine's temperament. She noted the swap in her log. Laundry started, we'll swap for hallway baseboards if time gets tight. Choices had to be written down or the day insisted they hadn't happened. Downstairs again, the house felt momentarily quiet, as if it were surprised at the thoughtfulness happening to it. She moved through the boys' rooms with a last glance, caught a rogue cup near a windowsill, and carried it to the kitchen sink with deliberate slowness. Break protected, she let her pace find its middle. She wiped a fingerprint from the fridge door that no one else would have noticed. She checked the time, 10:55. A hum in the far corner of her mind started counting backwards from 1 hour and 5 minutes. At 11:02, the front door opened and the in-laws arrived, ushered in by Claire's voice and the dog's drumroll tail. The house filled with the polite volume of family who like each other but still observe little formalities of speech. Smells lovely, the mother-in-law said to the air, which Amaya accepted as a compliment her work had earned. We brought bagels, the father-in-law announced, and a paper bag thumped onto the counter in a way that made the counter forgive him because he had brought sustenance. Claire popped into the kitchen with a half-panicked brightness and whispered, If you're hungry, please take one. Sesame, everything blueberries, my dad gets the weird ones. She grinned. You're saving me today. Then she was gone again, darting to help with the luggage that had already been halfway up the stairs. Amaya looked at the bagels the way a person looks at a kindly stranger passing by. The bag's mouth gaped, revealing a range of possible energy. She wasn't technically hungry now, break had supplied enough to keep hands intelligent, but there was the washer to consider, and the dryer after, and the way laundry made time think it could grow extra corners. Thank you, she called, meaning it, and returned to her list. She emptied the small trash cans in the bathrooms into the central bag, tied it, took it to the side yard, washed her hands again. At 11:18 her phone buzzed, plumber 15 minutes out, from Claire. At 11:19 the washer sang its little song that machines sing when they pretend they are happy to serve. She transferred sheets to the dryer, set it to a permanent press, and wrote, "Dryer end 11:50 on her note. At 11:25, with the kitchen truly complete and the rooms tidied within reason, Amaya took a step back to consider the hallway baseboards. She could do 12 minutes of baseboards before the dryer ended and still have cushion for a wipe down of the guest nightstand. She was about to crouch when Claire appeared again, mouthing sorry, even before she spoke. "The plumber's early," she whispered, as if early were a moral failing. "Could you just keep an eye while he's under the sink? I don't want him to think—" She did not finish the sentence, but Amaya heard the rest plainly. "I don't want him to think we don't keep house." "I'll be in the kitchen," Amaya said. "Just finishing my list." She did not promise to supervise the plumber. She would be present but not at attention like a guard. The plumber arrived with a toolbox and the peaceful competence of someone who knows where the pipes live. He tipped his chin at Amaya, slid under the sink, and began speaking to the valves in a language of gentle knocks. From 11:30 to 11:45, the house felt like a hive. Plumber humming, in-laws chatting, Claire moving from room to room smoothing edges. Amaya found herself, without quite intending, doing small extras that were not on the list but were in her nature when they took seconds. She straightened the hand soap by a quarter turn, she aligned a salt and pepper pair so they faced the same horizon. None of it would appear on an invoice, all of it was part of how a space announces it has been cared for. At 11:47 the dryer pinged, and Amaya went to rescue the sheets before wrinkles began their campaign. The guest room bed was the kind with a padded headboard that made you want to sit up and read, and she remade it with the calm pleasure of matching corners and smoothing air. The final tug installed the top sheet like a fact. She stepped back. The bed looked like a fair promise. The room looked like the kind of welcome that respects everyone. When she returned to the kitchen to wash her hands, a plate had appeared at the end of the counter. A sesame bagel sliced and spread with cream cheese, a small cluster of grapes, a paper napkin folded into a neat rectangle. Claire's voice floated from the dining room, "For you," as if she thought that leaving it without fanfare might make it less loaded. Amaya checked the time, 11:58. Her shift ended at noon. She felt a laugh rise in her throat, quiet and resigned. Lunch had come precisely when there was no time to eat it. She wrapped the napkin securely around the bagel like a small parcel and slid it into a spare zip-top bag from her kit. "Thank you," she called, and meant it, even as she planned the more real lunch she would have at 12:20 after driving across town. "Looks great in here," the plumber said, emerging from the sink with a satisfied nod. "You take care of this place." "She does," Claire answered from the doorway, pride in her tone that made Amaya both grateful and wary. Pride, she knew, could turn into ownership if left unattended. At the door, shoes on, bag lifted, Amaya ran through the closing script. "Kitchen reset, trash out, boys' rooms tidied, guest sheets washed and remade," she recited, counting on her fingers because fingers make lists feel undeniable. "We didn't get to the hallway baseboards this time due to the laundry swap. I'll send today's invoice and note the plumber visit and the rug pad recommendation again." Claire nodded, one hand on the dog's head, the other on her own temple as if holding the details in place. "Thank you. Sorry about the break interruption earlier. I get in these spirals where I think if I just ask now it'll get done and—" She stopped. "I'm learning." "I appreciate that," Amaya said. "Breaks help me work better. Next week we can block it on the fridge calendar if that helps everyone remember." She had never suggested that in another house. It came out of her mouth and sat there, a small radical idea dressed as a sticky note. "I love that," Claire said immediately, as if reminded she could choose systems that did not constantly demand apologies. Outside, the heat had deepened into the kind that persuades you to walk more slowly. Amaya tucked the bagel in beside her almonds and stepped onto the path. Her stomach registered hunger in a clear sentence. Lunch would happen. Just not here, not now, not in this kitchen that had tried to add its needs to the space where her body did its own caring. She took out her phone and typed the invoice note on the stoop while the details were still fresh. Break observed 10:30 to 10:40. Laundry swap documented. Plumber present 11:30 to 11:50. Bagel received at 11:58. Grateful but note, food offers earlier are more useful. She would not include that last line in the invoice. She would save it for the policy's addendum she was drafting in her head. Hospitality appreciated. Scheduled breaks protected. Mid-shift nourishment encouraged before final 30 minutes. As she reached the sidewalk, a breeze caught the edges of her shirt and cooled the place where nerves collect between shoulder and neck. The driver of a delivery van waved her across with a quick smile, and she lifted a hand in thanks. She thought of her mother, of the fitted sheet lesson, of how insistence and kindness can live on the same page if you write carefully. Lunch comes when you make it, she told herself without bitterness, and she turned toward the car feeling both the ache of a body that had worked and the steadiness of a person who was still teaching the day how to treat her. By the time the next Wednesday rolled around, Amaya had tuned her calendar to Claire's house like a musician tunes to a familiar key. She blocked the deposit reminder the night before, packed extra microfiber cloths for the boys' desks because pencils shed graphite the way trees shed leaves, and added a fresh pair of nitrile gloves because the last set had snapped at the wrist like a too small promise. On the drive over she let the radio hum without words. She preferred to arrive with a mind quiet enough to hear a room ask for what it needed. The lemon wreath greeted her again, now slightly tilted, as if even decor can get tired of pretending it is always welcoming. Inside, the air held coffee and the faint sweetness of something baked, maybe the mother-in-law's influence. Perhaps the house itself had decided to start producing apologies as pastry. Claire appeared with a speed that suggested she had been listening for the door. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, voice buoyant. "Every time you leave everything feels calmer. You're honestly the best thing that's happened to this house since we put in the new sink." "The plan is the kitchen, trash, boys' rooms tidy," Amaya said, stepping into the familiar opening script before the compliments could swell to a tide. She set her bag by the peninsula, sipped water, and glanced at the analog clock above the stove. 9 a.m. A clean start line. "Yes, yes," Claire said, hands fluttering like birds over the counter. "And if time allows," she caught her own phrase and smiled at the small joke. "The upstairs hallway baseboards. My mother-in-law was actually impressed with the guest room. She said, 'It feels like a hotel, but that's not an insult, it's a compliment,' which is the most mother-in-law sentence ever. She also noticed the hallway baseboards. I swear she sees dust in Braille." "I'll aim for the baseboards if time allows," Amaya said, and began the choreography of the kitchen. Clear then clean, a two-step that could soothe most domestic disasters. The dog trailed her like a kindly shadow. When she moved to the sink he interpreted it as a cue to lie down and supervise. She lifted plates from the counter and slid them into the dishwasher with the economy of someone who'd learned the geometry of loading. Bowls nested, plates aligned, cups upside down like patient planets. She tuned out the background noise of a calendar clogging and unclogging, the occasional text ding that sounded like a fairy tapping a wand on granite. When Claire resurfaced from the dining room with her laptop, she brought a new kind of energy, airy and slightly conspiratorial. "I have to say this," she began, drawing closer, lowering her voice as if she were about to discuss a secret ingredient rather than a human being. "Everyone keeps asking about you. I posted those towel stacks to my story, hope that's okay? And 3 moms messaged me like, 'Who is your person?' I told them I'm gatekeeping, huh? But truly you're incredible. The way you make the counters look like they belong in a magazine. The sink? I keep staring at the sink like I did when the boys were newborns, just in love." Compliments like these were a soft rain that can either nurture or erode. Amaya smiled, appreciative without drinking so much she drowned. "Thank you," she said, continuing to wipe a syrup arc that had returned like a sequel. The cloth moved in small circles. The shine came back with a tiny sigh. "Glad the systems are working for you." They are," Claire said, and then, as if the compliments had constructed a bridge to her real intention, she walked onto it without breaking stride. "Which is why I was thinking, would you be open to staying a little later today? Just today. Maybe till 4? Our friends are coming tonight, casual dinner, very low-key, but the yard looks like feral children live here and I'm already behind on prep. You're just so efficient, and with you, everything feels doable." There was the hook tied to honey. "You're just so efficient," she repeated, a phrase that could both admire and consume. Amaya kept her expression open, the way a window can be open but still have a screen. Inside, she felt the quiet click of a boundary lock into place. "I'm booked afternoon," she said. "If you want to schedule an extended session in the future, we can plan for it with deposit and adjusted rate. For today, I have you from 9 to noon." Claire nodded quickly, face flushing as if she had reached for a cookie before dinner and been gently reminded to wait. Of course," she said, then added, laughing at herself, "I just thought I'd ask. You're transformative. Like if Marie Kondo and a fairy godmother had a love child." "Thank you," Amaya said again, and this time she let the warmth of the compliment be a thing she could touch without letting it touch everything. She moved to the trash, tied off the bag, and glanced toward the side yard window. The sky was blue in that spring way that persuades people to host dinners they do not have time to prepare. "I'll take this out and get started on the boys' rooms," she said. Claire leaned a hip against the counter and considered the schedule like it was a puzzle she could solve by wanting. "You're a lifesaver," she said again, a phrase quickly becoming a metronome in this house. "Oh. Also, if you have any capacity Friday afternoon, this is totally optional, we could pay extra for just a quick yard tidy. I know it's not your thing officially, but you do everything with such intention." "I appreciate the offer," Amaya said, lifting the trash bag with one hand and steadying the door with the other. "I don't do yard work, but I can refer you to someone who does." The words felt like laying down a plank where there had been a tendency to swim in requests. Referrals were a way to say no and still be helpful, to keep the relational fabric unfrayed without stitching herself into it. In the side yard, the bins opened their mouths like polite beasts. She fed them and thought about the shape of compliments. They could be bomb, they could be bait. They could be gratitude and also a strategy, an almost invisible pressure that asked you to be exceptional at a discount. She breathed the clean air and went back in. Upstairs, the boys' rooms had been kind to her this week. Maybe the photo of the towel stacks had motivated them. Maybe a grandmother's visiting aura rearranged natural chaos. She aligned a few notebooks, liberated a rogue sock from under a bed, and restored a Lego ship's wing to its body without committing the crime of rebuilding it wrong. She left the drum pad alone, it belonged to a hand older than his mother imagined, and slid a cup onto the desk coaster as a sign that households are ecosystems with rules even when no one says them out loud. When she came back downstairs, she found Claire in the kitchen with a bright expression that said, "I have another idea." "So this is wild," she began, "but would you ever consider training our sitter? She's sweet but young and she just doesn't see what you see. If she could shadow you for an hour, paid of course, maybe Fridays? You're on another level." Amaya set her cloth down so she could meet the question as a whole person, not a person mid-gesture. "I don't offer shadow training," she said. "It changes the dynamic in ways that don't work for me. What I can do is leave a simple checklist of maintenance tasks for non-cleaning days. That's included. If you want a deeper systems consult, supplies, storage, weekly rhythm, I offer a separate 2-hour consult with a written plan." Claire blinked as if absorbing light. "A consult," she repeated, tasting the word. "That would be amazing. And that's separate from cleaning? Like a strategy session?" "Yes," Amaya said. "Different hat. I bring a template. We walk through room by room. You pick 2 pain points to solve. I write the plan. It helps everyone get on the same page so daily maintenance doesn't become a crisis." She didn't add that it also prevented compliments from needing to do the work of boundaries. The plan would carry that weight quietly. "I love this," Claire said, and the relief in her face looked different now, like someone who'd been offered a staircase rather than a rope. "Let's book it. After spring break? I'll email you times." "Works," Amaya said. She checked the oven glass, still clouded, still a candidate for next time with consent, and wrote "consult" in a note to herself. The rest of the morning unfolded with the reliable cadence of effort and completion. She took out the recycling, wiped a mysterious purple smudge that had appeared on the pantry door, and returned the dog's ball to a basket the way you return a thought to its correct shelf. At 11:45, Claire drifted back into the kitchen with a handful of fresh flattery, like someone offering flowers culled from their yard. "I honestly don't know how you do it," she said. You're like, what's the word, telepathic? You fix things I didn't know were broken. That corner by the coffee machine? I didn't even know it had a corner. It's just practice, Amaya said, rinsing her cloth. And listening. Rooms say where they want things. People do too. Claire laughed, startled by the truth inside the metaphor. I wish I listened as well as you, she said. I'm trying though, and I see you. I hope you feel that. I know this work is invisible to a lot of people, but not to me. She placed a hand over her heart in a gesture that, for once, did not ask for anything back. Thank you, Amaya said, and this time the compliment reached a place in her that was not connected to a request. She dried her hands, went over the closing script, kitchen reset, trash out, boys' rooms tidy, and reminded Claire that an extended session would need scheduling and deposit. The word deposit had become a tiny anchor that kept boats from floating off into the land of maybe later. On the porch, she wrote a quick invoice note while the details were still fresh. Standard session 9 to 12 completed. Referrals for yard work offered. No yard work performed. Training request declined. Offered consult option instead. Client interested. Follow up with consult dates. She added one private annotation to herself, not for the client file but for her own growth. Compliments today felt like sugar with spinach hidden inside. Accept the sugar, don't pretend it's lunch. Driving away, she thought of the times in her early years when a "you're amazing" had persuaded her to bleed 15 extra minutes into a job for free, or to say yes to just this once, in a way that trained the day to expect it again. Kind words cost nothing and also sometimes cost the person receiving them more than they can afford if they aren't careful. Now, when praise arrived, she honored it, but she no longer let it negotiate on behalf of other people. Flattery could be a bouquet, not a contract. At a red light, her phone pinged. A message from Claire. Thank you X1000. You're a gift. P.S. We're definitely on for a consult after break. I'll send deposit tonight. Another ping followed. Also, if your Thursday late afternoons ever open, I'd love to add a bi-weekly. No pressure. Just putting it out there. Amaya smiled. The boundary was holding. The relationship was growing in places that had room. She typed back, thanks. I'll send consult info. Bi-weekly, Thursdays are full through May. I'll let you know if anything shifts. She hit send and turned the radio up one notch, letting a song carry the quiet between jobs. That evening, as she set her own dinner table, a salad that knew what it wanted, a piece of bread buttered to the corners, she replayed the day's script in her head, making small edits for the next house, the next compliment that might be true and also a tool. She was learning to let gratitude in without making it her boss, to let other people feel impressed without being hired by their amazement. The hook was there, gentle, glittering. She saw it and kept swimming on. The request came on a Friday that had been so ordinary it almost dared the universe to make it unusual. Amaya had finished a morning job where the homeowner left a check exactly the way she had asked, tucked under a magnet shaped like a chicken. She had eaten lunch at a real table in a small cafe because she'd built an extra 30 minutes into her schedule on purpose. She had even read 5 pages of a novel and remembered what it felt like to care about a fictional person's problems. At 1:42 p.m., her phone buzzed. Claire. Emergency ask. The message began, and Amaya's back straightened before she asked it to. Dinner party tonight turned into 12 people. Babysitter canceled. I know you don't do nights, but is there any chance, you could come 4 to 8 to help reset house, light prep, and keep boys channeled? We will pay your evening rate plus rush. Completely understand if no. You are the only person who can make this house behave. Amaya had learned to be suspicious of sentences that started with, you're the only person who, but she also heard the sincerity pressed into the words. She looked at her calendar. She had planned to spend the evening doing laundry and mending a seam on a favorite shirt. She had also planned to sleep before 10 like a person making a long-term truce with her own nervous system. Still, rush fee evening rate, a client who was learning. She thought of the consult they had on the books for after spring break, of the fact that Claire had treated her like a colleague rather than a wand these past weeks. She typed with careful fingers. I can do 4 to 8 p.m. tonight, she wrote. Evening rate applies, rush fee applies, 50% deposit needed to hold. Scope: kitchen reset before guests, light prep tasks as assigned, boys supervised for set blocks, no yard work, no non-household errands. Break at 6 p.m. for 15 minutes. Payment due on completion. She paused, read it again, contract spine inside a friendly body, and hit send. The deposit pinged back within 5 minutes. "You are a miracle," Claire replied. "I will never gatekeep again. Tell me what to do to be ready." "Make a list of top priorities and where supplies live," Amaya texted. "Label any special use serving dishes. Put boys' activities in one bin. Set timer reminders on your phone for 6 o'clock break." A smiley face followed from Claire, then a cascade of heart emojis she could have done without but accepted as part of the cultural water she swam in. At 3:58, the lemon wreath watched her arrive as if it had been promoted to sentinel. Inside, the house vibrated with pre-party electricity, the kind that causes forks to ricochet off counters and children to orbit faster than physics allows. Claire intercepted her with a hug she didn't quite get to complete, then laughed at herself and redirected her hands to a gesture that said welcome, help, sorry, thank you, all at once. "Okay," she said, already moving them toward the kitchen. "Priorities: counters, sink, trash out, prep crudité and a cheese board. Boys need a quiet time at 5:30 so we can light candles and pretend we live like that." And her eyes landed on the oven door like she had just remembered an old sin. And if by some miracle the oven glass could look less like that. No pressure. "Oven glass is a deep clean add-on," Amaya said, gentle but clear. "I can spot improve with a damp scrape in 10 minutes if we swap something small." "Your call." "Swap crudité for a quick cheese board," Claire decided, mind doing the math of appearances. "People always fill up on cheese anyway. I'll cut carrots later if anyone looks too healthy." They smiled at each other with different parts of the same exhaustion. The dog, picking up the mood, took his ball to a corner and chewed in solidarity. Amaya set her phone timer for 4 hours, then created a nested timer for her 6 o'clock break because breaks have to be protected by technology when people forget how to protect them with culture. She moved through the kitchen like a conductor waving a small orchestra toward coherence. Dishes into the dishwasher, clean towels deployed, trash tied and taken out. A quick, satisfying scrape on the oven glass that lifted a translucent film like a confession. She left the oven not perfect but reflective enough to be forgiven under candlelight. She arranged cheeses and crackers on a wooden board she would never call charcuterie on principle, tucked in dried apricots like comets, and placed a small bowl of almonds as if to promise herself she would eat one later. At 5:05, the boys, a pair of kinetic philosophies named Eli and Max, barreled into the kitchen with announcements about everything. "Grandma says napkins are for elbows," Eli said, which was either true or an experiment. "Can we have 1 grape now or 9 later?" Max demanded, an offer that counted as negotiation. Amaya met them at their speed with a calm that turned out to be contagious. "Activity bin at 5:30, she told them. "Epic Lego build on the dining room rug. I will guard it from adult feet with my life. But right now you're my crumb inspectors. Anything crunchy on the floor must report to the trash." She handed each a small dustpan and watched them transform into deputized agents of order, sweeping theatrically, laughing when the dog tried to bribe them with his ball. Claire drifted in and out, hair pinned in a way that looked like she pinned it while thinking of 3 other things. "I don't know how you do this," she said at least twice, the words a talisman against chaos. At 5:28, Amaya announced quiet time with the gentle impact of a snow-softened bell. Eli and Max settled in with Lego. Amaya drew an invisible tape line around the build zone, and Claire lit candles that made the kitchen lean toward intimacy. The doorbell rang at 5:46, then 5:52, then every 3 minutes in a social algorithm that made sense only if you believed in fate. Guests arrived with wine and opinions about parking. Coats accrued on hooks with dreams of being found again later. At 6 o'clock, Amaya's phone sang the break song, a neutral chime she had chosen to sound like a polite hand on the shoulder rather than an emergency. She washed her hands, took her water bottle, and stepped onto the back stoop where the evening was unfolding into something copper and kind. She ate 2 almonds and 1 apricot and allowed herself to taste them rather than treat them as obligations. Her shoulders dropped the half-inch they had been holding. Her jaw remembered that it was not required to brace. Through the screen door she could see Claire smiling and pouring something that laughed in glasses, hear the boys narrating the Lego City like sportscasters calling a game while also making the rules. The break occupied its full 15 minutes. The timer chimed again. She went back in. The second half of an evening shift is where time can forget its edges, especially when hospitality starts producing dirty forks at a rate unmatched by the dishwasher's cycle. Amaya moved through the tide without letting it pull her under. She worked in visible loops so guests could see the rhythm and not hand her their dish like they were consecrating her to a life of picking up after them. She wiped counters without making it obvious that she was also resetting expectations. She smiled at people who said, "I would help, but then I'd just be in your way," a sentence that always sounded like an essay waiting to be graded. At 7:10 she heard the whisper of crisis from the dining room. The boys, bored with building, were testing the hypothesis that a candle does or does not melt a Lego head. Amaya arrived like weather in the doorway, soft and certain. "Science experiments tomorrow," she said, and swapped in a sheet of bubble wrap from her bag like a magician producing a rabbit. "Tonight, you're bubble engineers. Quiet pop only. 10 minutes. The boys regarded her with respect disguised as resistance and then surrendered to the pleasures of controlled destruction. Claire mouthed thank you from the kitchen, hand over heart. By 7:35, the guests were in the warm descent of a good night, those last conversational arcs that promise future lunches without scheduling them. Amaya did a final sweep of the kitchen like a benediction, set the dishwasher and placed a clean tea towel next to the sink like a flag of peace. She collected her bag, checked the clock, 7:58, and headed to find Claire for the close. Claire was by the door, laughing in that tired, buoyant way of someone landing a plane without instrument training. When she saw Amaya, her face arranged itself into gratitude and the faint panic of a person who has forgotten an essential. "You're an angel," she said. "Everything felt possible because of you." "Glad it went well," Amaya said. "I'm heading out." Evening session 4 to 8 completed. Kitchen reset, light prep, boys supervised 5:30 to 6 o'clock and 7:10 redirection. Oven glass spot improvement, no yard work, break at 6 o'clock observed. Invoice total is the evening rate plus rush, payment due on completion. She kept her tone friendly, the way you say goodnight to someone you like while also reminding them the meter runs even when the conversation is sweet. For a fraction of a moment, Claire's eyes flicked toward the dining room where a guest was telling a story with their whole body. Then she looked back, smile still bright, and said the sentence Amaya had hoped not to hear. "Can we just settle in the morning? My card is upstairs and everyone's leaving and," she gestured at the glow, the coats, the candle's soft air. "I swear, first thing. I'm good for it." The room's sound thinned like someone had turned down an invisible knob. The clock's hand kissed 8. Amaya felt the old path appear at her feet, the one that allows hope to masquerade as policy. Then she felt the newer path, the one she had paved with deposits and clauses and a practiced voice, and stepped onto it as if it were a floor built for her. "My policy is payment on completion for evening rush sessions," she said, warm and factual. "I'm happy to wait while you grab your card, or I can send a quick link now." She lifted her phone slightly, an offering. The words did not accuse or apologize, they stood. Claire's smile faltered, then returned, smaller but more honest. "Right?" she said, nodding. "Right. Of course." She looked over her shoulder like someone leaving a stove to get their wallet, then back at Amaya, then up the stairs. "Give me 2 minutes." She disappeared. In the 2 minutes, the air adjusted around the space Amaya had made for herself. The dog leaned against her shin like he had been waiting for the declaration of self-respect and now could relax. A guest passed and said, "You keep this ship together," in the tone of a person who had worked in restaurants and recognized labor that keeps everyone else pretending they're not standing on someone's invisible shoulders. Amaya said, "Thank you," and meant it. The compliment contained no hook, it floated freely. Claire returned with her card and a flushed expression that said both embarrassment and a small pride in doing the right thing in front of herself. "Run it for the total," she said. "And add the rug pad consult deposit for next week. Let's just do it." She laughed softly. I'm learning. It's slow. But I'm learning. Amaya sent the payment link because tapping was easier than inserting a rectangle in a reader that might argue. The confirmation flashed with a pleasant ding. She texted the receipt and her goodnight message, then tucked her phone away. Thank you, she said. Have a beautiful evening. I'll see you Wednesday for the regular session and I'll email consult prep on Monday. As she stepped onto the porch, the 8 o'clock air wrapped around her with the coolness that can only be felt by someone who has carried heat all day. The lemon wreath watched her like a witness. She walked down the path with her shoulders level, the evening not heavy on her back because she had refused to wear the part of it that belonged to someone else. Behind her, laughter spilled into the yard and softened against shrubs that needed trimming, a chore that would be done by someone who did yard work, not by her. She put her bag in the passenger seat, sat for a minute with her hands on the wheel, and let the muscle under her sternum unclench. There would be other nights, other people with other emergencies dressed in praise. There would be days where the clock would beg her to forget what time means. But tonight, at 8, she had insisted that her work ended where she said it did and that the value of it could be measured, honored, exchanged. When the message came in from Claire at 8:11, "Thank you again. You changed the whole night." Amaya smiled, and for once the sentence did not feel like an invoice waiting to be paid. It had already been settled. Monday morning came with rain that made every surface look newly invented. Amaya drove to Claire's house with the wipers keeping time, thinking about the consult booked for next week and the way Friday night had pressed its test against her ribs. She had passed, payment at 8, receipt sent, dignity intact, and yet the body remembers each exam, even the ones you ace. She parked beneath the drip line of a maple and sat for a breath, palms on the wheel, borrowing steadiness from the simple rightness of forward and stop. Inside, the lemon wreath looked glossy with rain, the foyer tile freckled with dog prints that would later be part of the day's satisfaction. Claire's voice reached her from the kitchen before she could call hello. "You're here," she said, relief and enthusiasm poured into the same cup. "I swear the house exhaled when I saw your car." She wiped her hands on a towel that had ambitions to be clean. "Can I confess something mortifying?" "Of course," Amaya said, setting down her bag and scanning automatically, counter clutter, sink load, trash nearly due, boys' rooms unknown. She sipped her water and gave her attention like a steady light. "After you left Friday," Claire began, "one of our guests said, 'Your person is a magician. Does she do Sunday mornings?' And I said, 'She's very in demand,' which is code for, I didn't pay her enough to ask." She winced at herself. "Also, Saturday I almost texted you at 7 a.m. because the coffee grinder exploded and I thought, Amaya will know how to fix this, and then I remembered I'm an adult. Anyway," she took a breath. "Thank you for holding the line Friday. It was good for me." Amaya let the appreciation land. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "And for paying on completion. It helps me keep evenings sustainable." She glanced at the stove, at a dried constellation of sauce, and made the small mental note that precedes motion. "Today is standard. Kitchen, trash, boys' rooms tidy. We're still on for the consult next week?" "Yes," Claire said. "Deposit sent. Also, my neighbor asked if I'd share your info. She's lovely but intense. I told her I'd ask you." Claire laughed. "She's the type to say, no pressure right before applying all the pressure." "I can share my booking link," Amaya said. "New clients go on a wait list. I schedule based on capacity." She had learned to keep her voice level on the word capacity. Some people heard it as an obstacle, some as a sign she valued both her work and herself. She had space for one new bi-weekly slot in June maybe. Her calendar was a garden. She tended it with pruning she had once been afraid to do. She started the kitchen ritual, clear then clean. Under her hands the mess resolved from persuasive argument into sentence structure. The dog, slightly damp from a brief sortie into the rain, lay with a sigh by the back door like a rug that had chosen where to be. At 9:22, Amaya was scraping the inside of the microwave with a damp sponge when a notification grazed her phone. Another client, a sporadic one, asking for just a quick pop-in tomorrow because in-laws had decided to swing by. Amaya resisted the gravity of quick, the way it tries to disguise itself as reasonable. She toggled to her template response. Thanks for checking. I'm booked this week. If you'd like to secure a future slot, here are the options. She felt the small power of not contorting to fit other people's suddenness. Quick question, Claire said, appearing with a hairspray cloud of energy. Would you mind grabbing groceries after you finish? We're out of half the world and I can't face the store with the rain. She handed over a list half written on a sticky note, as if it might transform itself into an errand by proximity. Amaya didn't flinch. I don't run non-household errands, she said, gentle and steady. I can help you order delivery though. Or you can add an errand block to a future session if you want me to pick up supplies specific to cleaning, with mileage reimbursed. Claire made the face of a person realizing they'd reached for a tool in the wrong drawer. Right, she said, chastened but not sulking. Right. Delivery. Yes. Help me build a cart when you take your break. Happy to, Amaya said. A moment later she added, break is at 10:30. Saying it out loud put guardrails on the morning so that interruptions couldn't pretend to be the road itself. The boys thundered downstairs in unison, one wearing mismatched socks with superhero conviction, the other with hair that had made choices. Ms. Amaya, Max asked between bites of toast, how do you make the counters so shiny? His tone held curiosity without the adult undertones of demand. 3 things, she said, smiling. Hot water, the right cloth, and doing it every time. She finished loading the dishwasher, set it to run, and wiped an arc that reflected a pendant lamp like a small planet. Also, not putting jam knives face down on the counter. Max blinked at his knife as if seeing it for the first time as a citizen accountable to a nation of surfaces. Oh, he said and put it on a plate. It was the kind of tiny victory that doesn't belong on an invoice but belongs in the story of why people hire humans and not machines. At 10:28, Amaya's internal clock chimed. She rinsed her hands and said, I'm taking my break now. The declaration occupied a square foot of air with surprising authority. Claire, who had been mid-sentence to the dog about the rain, pivoted instantly. Yes, she said, catching herself. I'll bring my laptop to the table. We can build the grocery cart while you eat. She looked sheepish. If that's okay. It is, Amaya said, taking out her almonds and apricots and a small sandwich she'd tucked in because the rain made hunger feel more active. They sat at the table in an easy quiet that acknowledged both company and independence. Between bites, Amaya offered suggestions for substitutions, asked about preferred brands, and reminded Claire that buying the giant jug of vinegar was smart, while buying the giant bottle of exotic surface spray was not. They finalized the cart. Claire hit order, then closed her laptop with the satisfaction of having tamed at least one necessity. When Amaya stood at 10:40, she felt the way the break had restored her balance rather than merely pausing motion. She went upstairs to the boys' rooms. The Lego city had been partly annexed by stuffed animals whose legal status was unclear. She enforced borders by suggestion, not decree. 5 minutes later, the rooms looked like their owners had considered them and chosen to keep them. Back in the kitchen, Claire hovered with a last ask she hadn't yet risked. I'm embarrassed to ask this, she began, twisting the towel with her hands. It's about the invoice. After Friday I had 2 charges hit that I wasn't expecting. My fault, and I'm a tiny bit tight today. Could I pay half now and half tomorrow? I don't want to be that person. She exhaled. I'm trying to do right by you and also not bounce my account. Here it was, a request balanced on vulnerability instead of flattery. Amaya could feel the old part of her that would rush in to help, to absorb, to carry. She could also feel the revised part that knew her own timeline mattered. Thank you for telling me, she said. 4 standard sessions. My policy is payment on completion. 4 regular clients in good standing. I do allow a same-day grace window if payment is split, half at close, half by 9 p.m. via link. After that, the late fee kicks in. She kept her voice kind. The boundary didn't need armor, it needed clarity. Claire's shoulders loosened in visible relief. That's fair, she said. I can do half now and half by 9. Thank you. The rest of the shift was a sequence of completions that added up to harmony. At 11:55, Amaya washed her hands, dried them on a towel that would soon become not clean again, and went through the checklist. Kitchen reset, trash out, boys' rooms tidy, grocery order placed. She texted the payment link. Claire tapped half the amount while they were standing there. I set an alarm for 8:45, she said, showing Amaya the phone screen with a sheepish smile. No lateness. I respect the late fee though, it's the only thing that disciplines me. On the porch, rain softened to a mist that made the yard look like it had been painted with kind attention. Amaya logged her notes. Break observed, errand request declined with alternatives. Invoice split pre-approved with same-day deadline. Neighbor referral, booking link sent. Her stomach felt even, not clenched. The calm wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the product of meeting conflict with a tone that did not treat anyone as an emergency except herself when she needed rest. That evening at 8:37, Claire's text arrived. Paying the second half now. Thank you for making it easy to do the right thing. The confirmation ping followed. Amaya smiled at the phone, grateful. She set it face down next to the book she'd been nursing for weeks and let herself read to the end of a chapter. A different kind of boundary met and kept. 2 days later, Amaya knocked on a door she hadn't visited in months. The kind of client you keep in the outer ring of your orbit because their gravity can yank your calendar into uncomfortable shapes. Lila lived in a townhouse that had been staged for an open house once and never quite surrendered the performance. The first-floor powder room mirror had words written in dry erase that said, "Smile, and you got this." And when Amaya had last cleaned it, she had left the messages intact because erasing encouragement felt like poor citizenship. Lila opened the door with a heat that registered as charm until it burned. "Angel," she cried. "Get in here, you magical miracle." "Morning, Lila," Amaya said, stepping past a pile of shoes that were conspiring to become a sculpture. "We're on for a 2-hour maintenance reset, kitchen and baths," she reminded, sliding in the contract spine before the compliments could grow legs. "Totally," Lila said, waving a hand that wore 3 rings with the slouch of inherited confidence. "And maybe the living room if you have a second? We're having people over tonight. It's a vibe thing. You'll get it." She was already walking toward the kitchen. "Also, the oven is doing that weird smoky thing again like it inhaled a ghost." "Oven deep clean is an add-on," Amaya replied. "Today is kitchen and baths. If there's time at the end, I can do a quick living room straighten within the 2 hours." Lila made the face of a person forced to eat a vegetable. "You're the boss," she said, which in her mouth sometimes meant, "I hope you'll feel bad and do more." Amaya breathed quietly and let the phrase drop without echo. The kitchen wore the aftermath of a week that had begun with intention and ended with takeout. Amaya started her measured waltz, clear, rinse, load, wipe, and the room remembered itself in stages. She photographed a before shot of the counters and sink, not as a threat but as a record. Lila had a way of forgetting the beginning and only seeing the middle. The pictures sat in Amaya's encrypted folder like polite witnesses who would speak if asked. The powder room was its usual theater. Quotes on the mirror, a candle that smelled like an expensive fruit you can't find in stores, towels that had pretended to be decorative and then been used by actual hands. Amaya took a quick photo of the sink and mirror, splatter constellation, and set to work, top down. She used separate cloths because cross-contamination is how you tell a space you don't respect its parts. While the cleaner rested on the faucet base, she texted herself the start time and a shorthand list. Lila 9:10 start. Kitch load, PR mirror/sink, main bath after. Lila popped into the doorway. "Quick thing," she said in the universal tone of people about to drop a piano. "Can you also run to the corner store for ice? The freezer is a joke." "I don't do off-site errands," Amaya said without apology. "Add ice to your delivery order or I can remind you at the end." She smiled so the no could sit comfortably like a well-placed chair. Back in the kitchen, a mystery stain near the stove surrendered with a patient scrub. Amaya took a mid-progress photo because the transformation would be satisfying, and because documentation, timestamps, sequence, kept narratives honest. At 10:02 she moved to the main bath. The shower had done what showers do, hosted human life and kept evidence. She noted a cracked tile near the bottom, photographed it with a coin for scale, because damage becomes drama when people need someone to blame. She texted the photo to herself with the caption, "Pre-existing." At 10:30, the dishwasher clicked to life, an ally in the war against entropy. Amaya drank water and let herself feel the half-minute of accomplishment. She moved through the last motions with intention so she would have 10 minutes to give the living room a mercy straighten. Pillows aligned, coffee table cleared of a drift of catalogs. She took a quick before and after there too, not as insurance, just as a reminder to herself that 10 minutes can change how a room breathes. At 11:05, she washed her hands and did the verbal close. 2 hours complete, she said. Kitchen reset, powder and main baths cleaned, quick living room straighten. Oven is still a future deep clean. I documented a cracked shower tile and included a photo. Also, we didn't do off-site errands. Lila nodded while typing, her attention a strobe light. You're honestly the only person who can keep me from moving into a hotel, she said. Payment later today? I'm on a call in 2 and then I have to run. But later for sure. Payment is due on completion, Amaya said, not unkind. I can send a link now. The smile faltered. Right, Lila said. Of course. She pretended to search for her card like it was shyer than it was, then surrendered. Send the link. Amaya texted it. Lila tapped. The confirmation arrived. Receipt will follow, Amaya said and meant on the spot. She stepped to the counter, opened her mobile invoicing app, itemized the work, and attached 8 photographs with categorical labels. Kitchen before/after. Powder room mirror before/after. Main bath tile damage with timestamp. Living room quick straighten before/after. She added a brief note. Scope per agreement. Off-site errands not included. Tile crack observed pre-clean. She hit send. Wow, Lila said, glancing at her phone as the email landed with polite efficiency. This is like professional. My contractor could take notes. It helps us both remember what happened, Amaya said. She didn't mention the last time Lila had threatened a bad review over a scratch on the refrigerator that turned out to be a magnet shadow. Receipts and records had turned the conversation from, "You damaged my new stainless," to, "Ah yes, the shadow where the dog calendar lived." It had saved both their faces and a relationship that, while not her favorite, paid on time when reminded. Amaya left and sat in her car to log the job. Lila, doc sent, scope held, payment on completion, off-site errand request declined, tile crack photo captured. She leaned back and allowed herself to feel the small thrum in her chest quiet. The rain had stopped, the sky thinking about returning to blue. She took 3 long breaths, then drove to her next client with the unglamorous satisfaction of systems working as designed. That evening at 8:13, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number sending a paragraph that began, "This is Lila's friend Jenna. She said you're a miracle worker. I'm dying in laundry and chaos. Could you come tomorrow just to organize?" Amaya read to the end, feeling both the pole and the boundary rise like levees. She replied with the link to her waitlist and a note about consults if Jenna wanted a plan instead of a rescue. Records and receipts was not only about photos and invoices, it was about keeping record of your own energy so you could hand receipts to yourself before the day spent you. 2 days later, Lila texted a photo of the now-replaced tile with a bouquet emoji. "You saved me from accusing my teenage nephew," she wrote. "He also thought he did it. Apparently he brushes his teeth like a lumberjack." Amaya laughed, thanked the universe for documentation, and moved photos from defensive habit to part of the craft. Not proof against people, but memory for everyone. The work survived not in applause but in the record of what hands had rendered true. The email subject line wore its intent like too much cologne. Urgent, today's clean, major issue. It came from a new monthly client named Mariah, a name that had arrived with immaculate references and a house that looked like a catalog had done a soft launch of its winter line. Amaya had completed a 3-hour deep maintenance that morning, kitchen, 2 baths, entry, stairs, and had left feeling like the house had accepted her as a competent guest. The message hit at 2:41 p.m., 20 minutes after she'd eaten a late lunch and decided her day could exhale. She opened it. "Hi Amaya," it began, deceptively warm. "Thanks for coming today. I just got home and noticed a huge scratch on the stainless range I'm 99% sure wasn't there. Also, the entry console looks different. My mother is very particular and she noticed immediately. We'll need to discuss a partial refund and how to prevent this going forward. Happy to jump on a call. There was no photograph attached. There was, however, a paragraph about expectations and our previous cleaner never did X. And I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. A younger version of Amaya would have felt the twinge of shame first, had she been careless. Then the urge to sprint into appeasement. A discount, an apology, a promise to compensate in energy. The practiced version felt a different order. Breathe, check record, reply from policy and not panic. She pulled up the file for Mariah, opened the before photos she'd taken at 9:05. Range surface with a faint pre-existing scuff below the right knob. Entry console crowded with frames arranged like they'd been set down while someone was late. She opened the after photos taken at 12:03, range reflective, the same faint scuff still present. Console wiped and the frames grouped into two intentional clusters with the center left free so the table could announce itself. She drafted a reply that was calm as a tiled floor. Hi Mariah, thanks for the note. I'm attaching before and after photos from today's visit for reference. You'll see a pre-existing scuff below the right knob that remains in place. There are no new scratches in my images. For the entry console, I grouped frames into two clusters to reduce crowding and make cleaning easier. That's reversible if you prefer the previous arrangement. My policy is to return items to functional order and clear surfaces unless I'm instructed to leave items as found. We can note your preference in your file. I don't offer refunds where documentation doesn't support damage, but I'm happy to walk through photos on a quick call. She attached 6 images labeled and time-stamped. She added, "Let me know what time works for you today before 6 p.m. Mariah replied at 3:01, faster than someone who needed to check with other people. Okay, I see the scuff in your photo. Maybe the light was harsh when I came in. The console. I just like it how my mother likes it. She's visiting. Could you put it back, as before next time?" There was no mention of refunds. The tone had softened by 5 degrees. The second email followed, pure sugar. Also, the bathroom sparkle. Thank you. I can actually see myself in the faucet, which is terrifying but good. Amaya smiled at the faucet line. She sent a brief, friendly close. Noted, console is found going forward. I'll add a line to your file. Thanks for confirming on the scuff. Glad the bathrooms are working for you. She then opened her notes and added 2 entries. Console, leave frames as found, do not regroup. Range, pre-existing scuff documented 9:05 and 12:03, client acknowledged. She let her shoulders drop the way they do when a false alarm stops ringing. At 4:12, a text pinged from an unknown number that turned out to be Mariah's mother, whose name was Elaine and whose style read as hotel manager on a stormy holiday weekend. This is Elaine. The console was arranged artfully by a decorator. Please instruct your girl not to move our vignettes. The word your girl arrived like a pebble in a shoe. Amaya had long ago chosen to decide when she would spend energy on language and when she would spend it on the next inhale. Today she wrote a short reply. Hi Elaine, this is Amaya. I'm the owner. Noted on vignettes. I've updated the file to leave the console as found. Be well. She sent it and counted to 10 to remind herself that not every microaggression deserves a dissertation. They all deserve internal acknowledgement so they don't rot where you can't see them. There was a time when a message like Mariah's would have gone differently. It would have opened with "you scratched" and closed with "discount expected." And Amaya would have folded. It wasn't only the photos that had changed the interaction. It was the way she spoke from documentation and policy as if she were not asking but telling the story of what happened. Gaslighting needs fog to function. Receipts are a window. That evening her phone buzzed again, this time with a number she recognized. Lila. You'd be proud, the text read. Neighbor claimed I dinged her car with my trash bin. I checked my ring cam. Nope. I sent her the clip and she apologized with a candle that smells like expensive grapefruit. Receipts, baby. Amaya laughed out loud in her kitchen, alone and suddenly not. The word receipts had become a verb, a practice, a way to pull shared reality out of a shared space. 2 days later, Mariah sent a follow-up email with subject line, "Clarification plus thank you." I realized I was stressed. It read, "My mom has opinions. Thanks for staying professional. Can we add no object rearrangement to the file except for cleaning necessity? And keep everything else as you see fit, because clearly your fit is better than mine." Attached were 2 selfies of a faucet so clean it was aspiring to be a mirror and arranged looking contrite about its permanent scuff. Amaya filed the email under resolved, added the preference line in Mariah's profile, and let herself feel the quiet victory of not being dragged into someone else's weather. On Friday, Amaya met Claire for the consult. They walked room to room with a clipboard and a settle-in feeling, mapping a weekly rhythm that would outlast the dog's shedding and the boys' Lego phases. Claire asked a question about the console situation after Amaya, in a moment of humanness, told the story over tea. "Do people often try to make you doubt what you know?" she asked, genuinely curious, not gossipy. "Sometimes," Amaya said, writing Thursday, "load towels, Friday, fold, Sunday, reset entry," in a neat hand that made systems feel like someone putting a hand on your back without pushing. "Sometimes they're scared. Sometimes they're embarrassed. Sometimes they're used to being right. Receipts help. Calm tone helps. Also knowing I can leave helps." "You can leave?" Claire asked, like a child learning the rules of gravity weren't absolute. "I can," Amaya said simply. "If the respect isn't mutual or the payment is a chase, or the house wants me to time travel and be in 3 places at once. Staying calm doesn't mean staying forever." Claire nodded slowly, absorbing a rule that had existed all along in the fine print of healthy work. "That's good," she said. "For you. And for me to remember." On her drive home, the rain returned in a light, generous way. Amaya thought about how often her work required a gentle insistence on reality. Not only the reality of stains and grout and time, but the reality that her hands were not public property, her patience not a resource to be mined, her professionalism not a stage to be set with someone else's props. Gaslight needs fuel. She kept her tank for driving. The day it happened, the air was hot enough to make the street shimmer, and Amaya had already promised herself an iced tea with too much lemon after her shift. She was back at Claire's for a Thursday glide, midweek upkeep to keep Friday from becoming penance. The house was in that agreeable state where things are out of place but want to return home. She had just finished wiping the kitchen island when a knock sounded at the back door, sharp and particular. Claire opened it to reveal a woman with a clipboard and sunglasses that tried to be polite while also policing. "Hello," the woman said, stepping in without being fully invited. "I'm with the HOA. We've had reports of service vehicles blocking the curb and other issues. We just want to make sure everyone is in compliance." Claire blinked, surprised and already apologetic in the way people get when someone invokes authority near their porch. "Of course," she said. "What issues?" "Noise mainly," the woman said, scanning without looking directly at Amaya. "And access." She turned to Amaya now, finally making eye contact. "Are you here with a company? We prefer professionals come through the side entrance so as not to disturb." Amaya felt her spine lengthen, not as a reaction but as a remembering. "I'm Amaya," she said, even and courteous. "I'm an independent contractor. I enter through the front door as invited. I don't use alleys." The woman's lips tightened. "We've found that side entrances are less disruptive." Claire, to her credit, found her voice its adult volume. "Our side path is uneven and unsafe," she said. "We invite Amaya in through the front because she is a professional and our guest. If you have a written policy about this, you can email it to me, but until then we'll do what's safe and respectful." The HOA woman made a note that might have been words and might have been a shape to fill time with. "We'll be in touch," she said, and left with the energy of a person who believed she had handled something. The dog issued a single, expressive huff. Claire closed the door and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 2 minutes. Did I?" She waved her hands, searching. "You did right," Amaya said and meant it. She felt the small relief of not having to carry the boundary alone. "Front door is the rule unless there's a safety reason otherwise. I don't do backdoor entrances or alley access. Good, Claire said. I hate that rule. It feels like something from a movie where men drink on porches and women don't. She looked at her towel like it might be to blame for the past. An hour later, while Amaya was vacuuming the family room, a neighbor appeared at the open front door as if he'd been summoned by the ghost of debate. He wore shorts that announced weekend money and held a complaint with both hands. Hey there, he said to Amaya, eyes sliding past her to Claire, who was arranging mail for recycling. Is this the cleaning day? Because last week the trash was out early and raccoons went to town. We've got an ordinance. Claire slipped into her role with a quickness that made Amaya's chest warm. Wednesday is our trash day, she said. The bin was out at 6 a.m., which is within ordinance. If raccoons threw a party, we'll keep the lids double-checked. Thanks. The neighbor looked disappointed, like he didn't get to do the sport he wanted to do. He glanced at Amaya and said, Make sure you put the bins back neatly, okay? We like a tidy street. Thanks for the reminder, Amaya said, voice level. I return bins to their place after the city picks up. Today isn't a trash day. She did not offer further education. She didn't have to. Claire was already at the door with a "have a good one" that ended the game. After he left, Claire shook her head. Do they just wake up and look for things to lord over? She took a breath. Sorry? I'm trying not to make you be the one educating white people about everything. I'm still learning where to step in and where to shut up. You did fine, Amaya said. It helps when the homeowner knows their own policies and the city's. That way I'm not the only one doing the explaining. At noon, Claire's mother-in-law, Elaine, arrived with a Tupperware of brownies and the briskness of someone who had a bone to pick with entropy. She looked around with the faux humility of a person checking for dust like a bloodhound. Things look good, she pronounced as if awarding a grade. Thank you, Claire said. Amaya keeps us that way. Elaine turned to Amaya with a different expression than the text day tone. You do a fine job, she said. My daughter is a hurricane and you are the sandbags. Systems help, Amaya replied, neutral but kind. A few minutes later, Elaine followed Amaya into the hallway while Claire was distracted by a delivery. Her voice lowered. In the future, she said, we'd prefer you park around the corner. The driveway is for family. Amaya held her own weather. I park on the street per the agreed plan, she said calmly. I do not use alleys. If Claire wants to adjust parking, she'll let me know. Elaine opened her mouth, closed it, then tried another door. Of course. I was just saying, we as the royal we. She smiled like it hurt. You have to understand, this neighborhood has certain standards. Respect and safety are mine, Amaya said and returned to the kitchen. To her surprise, Claire had heard the exchange from the doorway. She moved closer and spoke with the sincerity of someone signing a document. Mom, no, she said gently. We don't do that. Amaya parks where we agreed and she walks in the front door because she's a professional. If the HOA has an actual policy, they can send it to me and I'll review it. Until then, our standard is respect. Elaine blinked, recalibrating. Well, she said softer. Good. She put the brownies on the counter like a peace offering and patted the dog, who accepted without prejudice. The rest of the session unfurled without skirmish, the rooms cooperating because the people inside them had made a decision about what story they were telling. At the close, as Amaya washed her hands, Claire reached for her wallet without prompting and said, Payment now, and because my mother is visiting, I'm adding a tip for the extra diplomacy. That was labor and I saw it. Thank you, Amaya said, surprised by the generosity more than the amount. And thank you for being the voice today. The ally in the title had not been the neighbor, nor the HOA, nor the mother-in-law. It had been Claire, who was learning to be not merely grateful but responsible. On her way out, Amaya passed the neighbor's yard where the HOA woman was commiserating about shrubs. The woman glanced up, then away, choosing not to engage. That was fine. Not everyone gets converted by a single noon hour. She walked to her car, felt the heat lean against her, and thought about iced tea. The world would keep producing small authorities with clipboards and ordinances. Not all of them were wrong. Some were excuses for old habits to take new names. The difference now was that she didn't have to be the only wall the tide hit. Allies turned the singular into plural. We became less dangerous and more true. At the cafe, she ordered the tea and took a spoonful of lemon pulp for the pleasure of it. She texted a thank you to Claire, appreciated your voice today, and added a private line to Claire's file. Homeowner intervenes appropriately with HOA/neighbor. Front door policy reinforced by client. Files were not only records of work done, they were maps of where you could stand and be held. The next morning a message appeared from an unknown number. Hi, this is Karen from the HOA. After reviewing our docs, there is no rule about service entrances. Sorry for the confusion. Please direct any future questions to me, not the volunteers. It was small and late and still something. Amaya screenshotted it and filed it under Allies External, a folder that had been empty for too long and now had its first patient inhabitant. The consult day arrived with a kind sky and the feeling of a season changing its mind. Amaya showed up with a clipboard, a roll of painter's tape, and a folder labeled Claire, Home System Plan. She had learned that families relax when they can see a plan on paper and tape on shelves. Abstraction breeds sincerity without action. Claire greeted her like a teammate finally drafted to the right position. I made coffee, she said, and I warned everyone that for the next 2 hours we're making rules. They began in the entry where life tends to drop its backpack and its courage. Goal? Amaya asked. Peace, Claire said. And not tripping. They measured the console, they labeled baskets, mail, keys, outgoing, so that people would have fewer excuses to pretend those words were concepts. Amaya placed tape where the frame should live because nothing argues like an invisible boundary. She wrote leave as found in the notes with a parenthetical. Console vignettes are sacred to mother-in-law. They both laughed. The humor softened the rule without weakening it. In the kitchen, they identified a spot for things that drift. A harbor tray for items that need to leave the counter by bedtime. They reviewed products, culling the redundant sprays that promise the ocean in a bottle but deliver stickiness. Amaya taped a small list inside the cabinet. Daily, load/run dishwasher. Wipe counters, empty trash at 85% full. Wet, fridge quick. Friday, towel reload. She kept the verbs short so that participation wouldn't require a translator. At the boys' desks, she met Eli and Max where they were, not where an aspirational lifestyle app thought they should be. What do you need to do your stuff? She asked. A place for Lego that can be a mess, Max said without apology. A desk that isn't sticky, Eli added with a side eye to his brother. Okay, Amaya said, serious. Lego zone, dining room rug with a build boundary that moves on Sundays. Desk, no food, 1 cup rule. She looked at Claire. Agree? Agree, Claire said. They all shook hands like they were ratifying a treaty. Mattered. People obey what they help make. In the hallway they addressed the runner. Claire had bought a proper rug pad. Amaya installed it with the satisfaction of having advocated for something small that changed daily life. My mother will still find something, Claire said, half joking. But it won't be this. Give her a list, Amaya said. 3 allowed comments per visit. After that, she has to compliment the dog. They grinned like cousins in mischief. As they moved from space to space, the plan took shape. Bins where chaos had used to be an art form, labels that told truth without yelling, rhythms that respected the body. Amaya wrote in a clean hand and used the plural where it mattered. We do this, not Claire does this. The house had been expecting her to magic it into perfection. The plan trained it to participate in its own care. In the last 10 minutes, they sat at the table with coffee refills and the quiet that follows purposeful motion. Amaya reviewed the plan aloud while Claire followed the words with her eyes like a piece of music she could now hum. Entry console, leave vignettes as found. Harbor tray empties by bedtime. Front door policy for workers, respect plus safety. Breaks, posted on fridge calendar for my sessions. Errands, ordered during break or scheduled as errand block. Boys zones, Lego boundary through Sunday, desk no food rule plus 1 cup. Rug pad installed, no heavy books as fix. She paused. Anything you want to add? Claire considered, then surprised them both. I want to add, we pay on completion, she said, tapping the paper. It's not just a money rule. It's a respect rule. It tells the boys we don't delay what we owe people. Amaya nodded slowly, the way you nod when a concept arrives with its shoes on. Add it, she said, and Claire wrote it down in her own hand, her own ink. They signed the plan, an informal ritual that turned an understanding into a commitment. Amaya left a copy in the kitchen drawer and emailed a PDF with the subject line, Your House Plan. The PDF included links to the rug pad brand, a minimalist supply list, and a one-page trial versus full shift policy she had refined since the day she sent her first invoice to Claire. It was a gift disguised as structure. Payment for the consult came with a note on the transfer, "Thank you for teaching my house to be a decent citizen." The phrasing made Amaya laugh and also feel a little emotional in the private, cool part of her chest where pride lives when it's healthy. A week later, Amaya arrived for the regular session and found the fridge calendar annotated with Amaya break 10:30 to 10:40, in the boy's handwriting, scrawled but legible. There was a post-it on the harbor tray that said, "We emptied it." Someone had drawn a star. The rug had not tried to rebel. The console's vignettes were exactly where the tape said they should be, and the tape was invisible because it had served its purpose. Training, not policing. As she worked, the doorbell rang. Elaine appeared with a bag of groceries and a wary expression. She set the bag down, took in the labeled baskets, the posted break, the taped vignettes, and sighed like a person deciding to join civilization. "I brought coffee," she said, placing a cup on the counter near Amaya but not in her way. "Breaks at 10:30, I hear." "That's right," Amaya said. "Thank you." It wasn't a truce between them so much as a negotiated accord. It would hold. Later that afternoon, Claire texted a photo of Max standing by the harbor tray with his thumbs up. "He's proud," she wrote. "I told him you made the plan." He said, "She's the boss of clutter." Amaya sent a heart and saved the photo in a folder labeled Why. Not every house would become this. Not every client would learn to be an ally. Not every HOA would produce an apology email when wrong. Some days would still bring the old scripts where people try to take time with soft hands that don't look like theft. Some days Amaya would say no and leave. But this 10-chapter arc, trial turned shift, compliments turned hook, clock striking 8 and payment made, boundary spoken calmly, receipts assembled, gaslight refused, ally found, plan signed, added up to an ending where closure wasn't a slam of a door, but the quiet click of one that fits into its frame. On a Saturday, Amaya took her mother to lunch at a place with outdoor tables and leaves that made shade with dignity. She told the story in summary, editing out the parts that would only make her mother worry and keeping the parts that would make her nod. Her mother smiled the slow smile that goes with long memory. "I told you," she said, breaking bread like breaking a sentence into its right clauses. "People respect what you respect. You trained yourself to be respected, and then you trained the house. And let the house train them," Amaya added, enjoying the way the sentence completed itself. On the way home, her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't know. "Hi," it read, "I'm a friend of Claire's. I saw your plan. I've never seen anything like it. Do you have availability in July?" Amaya glanced at her calendar, at the months she had safeguarded with deposits and breaks and policies, and felt the satisfaction of a yes that included her, not just her labor. She sent the booking link with a note, "Waitlist opens next week." Then she put the phone away. Back at her apartment, she printed a fresh copy of her trial versus full shift one-pager and pinned it on her cork board for no one but herself. The top line read, "Know your worth. Put it in writing." The second line had evolved over the weeks. "Say it calmly. Say it early. Say it again." The rest of the page was the language she'd chosen and refined and made true by using break windows, payment timing, scope definitions, safety veto, documentation practice. Below it she tacked a photo of the harbor tray with the star sticky. She didn't need a wreath to tell her she was welcome in her own life. The porch was inside her now, and the door she walked through was the one she had built.